crisis time. You do what you have to do. You learn as you go along. And we also, remember January 1998, going home at 5 o'clock in the morning, and then coming to work at 8 o'clock, and then you go to the Bloomberg screen and you see what the exchange rate is, and then you look at, and you have to write briefs and papers and scrunch, and then I go up to the dealer's floor where foreign exchange team was working, and get updated information. And then we're thinking about policies to stem this. And then in September 98, we imposed capital controls. Our governor of the day and the deputy governor left, or they were asked to leave because they did not, there was a difference in policy.
The following is a long, open conversation with Kristina Rai, Chief Operating Officer at the Asia School of Business in collaboration with MIT Sloan. We got a chance to sit and talk about many topics, like central banking, what it's like to solve crises, and how she met her two closest associates. This is On the Long with FVR podcast. If you like this thing, feel free to like and subscribe, and to contribute to the channel on the description below. And now with y'all, Kristina Rai. So many moving parts, but hey.
It's time for everything.
Absolutely. Wait a second. Let me put it like this. So this is usually the view that you have, right?
Yes.
Very nice view.
Thank you. I love it too. It's a beautiful skyline.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I guess we can start whenever you want.
I'm ready.
All right. 3, 2, 1. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another episode on The Long with FVR. Today we have Kristina. Thanks for doing this.
Hi. Thanks so much for having me.
Absolutely. So we have been trying to do this episode, and now we have enough time because guess what? Such a nice view, so many souvenirs, and you have so many friends right here.
Yes, I do. I'm a thing person.
So people may be watching you and they have some questions, but the first one will be, who is this person? So I would like to invite the guests to ask, can you tell us a little more about yourself?
Sure. So I'm Kristina. I'm currently the Chief Operating Officer of the Asia School of Business, located here in beautiful Kuala Lumpur. I've been, prior to joining ASB last year in April, so I've been here just over a year. I've been a career central banker with the Central Bank of Malaysia, Bank Negara, Malaysia. I've been there for 3 decades. I was a bank scholar, a Bank Negara scholar for my first degree in economics, and then I carried on to do my master's, also under sponsorship of Bank Negara, and throughout I've had the great experience and privilege of working in different various sectors, in departments and sectors in the central bank. I've covered economics, international relations, international negotiations, strategy, and also learning and development in terms of being essentially the chief learning officer there before I came across here.
Oh, I see that. So literally has been like 30 years of the central banking. It feels like you can be teaching on the Masters of Central Banking.
No, you're very kind. I would say I know lots of facets of international relations strategy, and the organizational behavior side, the development side. I'd love, of course, to share my experience through Masters in Central Banking and other facets of what ASB does. Certainly, but thank you very much for thinking of that.
Now, given that there has been always a beginning, we may want to ask, how was the war when you were growing up? Because I believe that in Malaysia there are many places. So, which place was that?
So I'm Malaysian. I'm a child of 2 ethnic races in Malaysia. My father is Indian. He's Punjabi. And my mother, my late mother, she was Chinese. So they met in Penang, which is a beautiful cosmopolitan blend, a melange of what Malaysia is, harmonious, great interracial mixing, great food, as well as, the collision of so many different minds and cultures. And my father was a civil servant. He was an engineer. So I was born in late 1969 when man went to the moon. And I grew up in the 70s and 80s, mostly in the east coast of Malaysia. My dad's job took him to many rural or developing parts of Malaysia. We only finally landed in Kuala Lumpur as a teenager. So I was very privileged to see the green parts of Malaysia, the beautiful coastal lines, the generous, warm people in the east coast of Malaysia, as well as in the state of Perak, where I also had a short stint. I love the sea. I find it very calming. I find it a place to go to rest one's mind. I find that when you're at the beach and you look at the sea and you take your whatever is ruminating in your head and let it dissolve into the sea, it puts things in perspective. So Malaysia has got, it's blessed with great forests, deep blue oceans and seas, and a wonderful culture that is just so embracive of differences and diversity.
This is such a fascinating story because many people usually say I'm from one city and that's it, but your family has been across the green part of Malaysia, which is something that, let's be honest, is going to be fading away unless there are enough sustainable measurements to protect the green parts. Now, you mentioned that your father has Indian heritage and your mother is also with a heritage from the Chinese. I need to recall the people who have been watching this that Tessa Vasudevan on episode 40, she happens to also be on the same blend. So, given that you have been growing up and came here in Kuala Lumpur as a teenager, what made you say Bank Negara is the way?
I didn't decide. I didn't say. I would like to think that in my life I may have plans and ideas, but there's a greater divinity that shapes us all. I actually wanted to study law, and I worked really hard to get into the local university, but I didn't get to do law, and I was given the choice of economics at the University of Malaya, and I went into economics there, and someone suggested I try out for the scholarship, Bank Negara scholarship, which I did. I got it, and Bank Negara chose me. I didn't choose it initially, and I'm very grateful to and thankful really that through that decision and that choice made upon me, the course of my life changed. I got to do pieces of what I like, i.e., looking at things in a legal way, the principles of fairness, and looking at protecting, doing things correctly through my work in Bank Negara. And I think, you know what they say, when life gives you lemons, make lemonade. So I think I made a pretty good cocktail in my choice of staying on career in Bank Negara. And I have to say, it's not because I haven't thought of other options. I have, but always the pull of serving the nation and the privilege of being given opportunities to try out new things in the central bank, new portfolios, new projects, has kept me interested, has given me the opportunity to learn new things. And I think that is where, I think it's the mind that helps you create opportunities for yourself.
Creating opportunities for yourself. It sounds like an entrepreneur.
Yeah, perhaps.
And during your career, I need to discuss how was the early years, because those are the things that usually people are trying to fight the most. When you are starting your career, there are so many variables. So, which was the biggest challenges you faced early in your career?
I fell into economics. I joined the economics department upon finishing and graduating. And the choice of staying in economics was not one that, again, I didn't decide. I happened to win the gold medal for throwing the shot put at the sports carnival, and the economics department director at that time said something like, "Hey, you can stay on because we need more gold medals in our annual carnival, sports carnival." And I was like, okay. And instead of moving maybe to the regulation side or the investment operation side, I stayed in economics. And the difficulty wasn't, I can't say there's difficulty, it's just you are confronted with new assignments that challenge your knowledge. And it's up to you to go out there and sieve through questions you may have, understand the problem statement, and then look for answers or finish that assignment with a package of answers and options for your management or the bank to decide on. And that is probably the difficulty. It's about sourcing, it's about finding out, it's about researching, searching for not answers but solutions that fit the circumstance of what we're trying to solve. So it changed so much, and I always felt I had to keep reading a lot. I've been an avid reader of books since I would say about 9 years old. I can remember that. I think I probably didn't read until 9. My dad bought me a children's book, and I applied that at work. And at that time, in the early 90s when I joined, it was books. We didn't have computers, we didn't have the internet. Absolutely trawling through libraries and hoping that you'd stumble on a book that can answer. But a lot of it were also the knowledge that resided in people before me, counterparts around me. And in my day, we'd actually go through files, archives to understand why are we here, or why was a decision made. And I used to actually love going through files. Maybe it's weird, but I love to read through all those and files, and you go back, you'd be transported many years, and then you read about people who you hear about, their decisions, previous governors, deputy governors, and then you understand, oh, this is why. And you read about, you see the beautiful handwriting, cursive handwriting, and the decisions, their comments, and you understand, and it gives you a peek into the past. So that was how we learned in the past. And of course you had to do postgraduate studies, so I did my master's after 3 years, because that enrichment of the knowledge base, your domain understanding, it had to continue. And like I said, we didn't have accessibility through digital learning. It was all about learning through printed media and going to the teachers. So that was the most structured way of learning. So difficulties is about being a sleuth, like an investigator, trying to find out things and then putting things together. And along that journey, I learned about how you need to interact with people you don't know. And that's the other thing about working in an organization or anything. You're humbled by your lack of knowledge, and you are, how shall we say, again humbled by the knowledge that so many different people have. But your role is to knit, bring it all together, synthesizing things. And I find that is what is the hardest, because you're going through other people's knowledge in their brains, and asking people like, what you're doing now, extracting it out of talk and thought. But there was a lot more human aspect then. It wasn't so solitary as it can be now, because you don't have to delve through a book or go to a librarian and ask. Now you just get online and it's just you and whatever the virtual space allows you in. So I found great, all the little challenges that stretched me actually got me better and more confident, because I didn't start out confident. No one does.
It's true. It's the knowledge that gives you the confidence, and it's only solidified through applied experience. Now, you mentioned about researching, and something that happened in the past that for some reason is still going on in certain organizations are the silos.
Yes.
So how do you knit through the silos, especially back in those days?
Curiosity. To be honest, to sit down and talk to people. We used to have our lunch in Bank Negara at the hawker center. I grew up there for 30 years. That's where I've That's my watering hole and oasis. And you'd sit down at a long table, and you'd have different people from different generations. You'd have someone who was there for 20 years, someone there was 5 years, someone there 3 years, someone there just joined, all on one table. And the grapevine was incredible, because we would chatter, we would talk, we would make friends, we would, and there would be so many different personalities. Most central bankers are introverts. I guarantee that. I think it's maybe the pull of the job and the type of personalities that get drawn to that kind of work. And you'd see the whole range of personalities on the table, those that are a little bit more boisterous, a little bit more quiet, but all were interested in what others were doing. So I think we were in different departments, different sectors, we were in different silos, certainly, but that act of interaction helped the information flows. And it was, when you look back, I think it was quite effective, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And there was a flavor to it as well that you don't get through an email or through sometimes even a virtual meeting. It's sufficient, but it's not a great substitute for face to face. And then the triggers. The great thing is conversations trigger when you're in the same energy zone, when you're interacting like this, and you discover things that you didn't even think about from the offshoots, and that comes from, you know, I really do believe in face-to-face interaction. So that happened a lot, and that certainly helped with the silos were always there. There were always bosses who were trying to create greater, to intersperse more of what was happening, and this is where I learned you need to be curious. You should be inquisitive, not to the point of being offensive, but I think if you ask people to share, and that's how silos break. You need to sort of shatter it a bit, but it's an effort.
Talking about asking and the curiosity itself. Right now we are surrounded by very different buildings, and we have certain ornaments. Like this one, for example.
Yes.
I may need to ask, given your experience, how this came to be in your office?
Okay. I'm a very visual person. I love looking and admiring, or even like reflecting on objects and things. And actually I do like people watching as well, which I do less now because I'm on my phone most of the time. And so this is what we call wayang. We used to have shadow plays. It's called wayang kulit. Kulit means skin, wayang means show. So this is before we ever had, TV and movies. In our culture, and you'd find that around Southeast Asia, you would have traveling troops who would have a light and a sheet, and you would have a shadow play, and it'd be a story. This is sort of one of the pieces that would be held, and many of the stories came from the Hindu Mahabharata and Ramayana about how great, good over evil, and you would have the guru, the tok, that would have so many different voices and would make the stories come along. I used to see that when I was a little girl. We'd have a harvest festival by the sea, and then you'd have someone set this up, and you'd sit cross-legged and big crowds just watching. This was our entertainment, and the storytelling that went from village to village, town to town, following the harvest festival or whatever big major festival there was. So I'm very attached to things that represent Asian culture. This is just a micro sliver of which is dying out. So this will just be a symbol of the storytellers that entertained many of our generations until the 70s and early 80s. We used to have them.
I have to say that it's a way that they entertain but also tell a story.
Yes. It's didactic. They're trying to, create that culture and value system, right? Yeah.
Now, given that you as being in the early years connecting dots and being in a field that was literally divine destiny saying, come with us. When did you decide it's time to improve the skills and getting a master's? How was that about?
I decided I wanted to do my master's immediately as I joined the bank. It's like from week one. I felt that I knew, because I knew economics, but I didn't know enough of it, and I joined the monetary policy side, and so I wanted to understand a lot more about monetary economics and get deeper into the subject. I think, like I said, I fell into it. I wanted to do something else. I think I had to grow to understand the subject is one thing, and I felt I wasn't there. So, and when you join Bank Negara, it's the cream of the crop that we used to hire, and we still do. And they come from the best universities in the world, including Malaysia as well. Those are the best in Malaysia. And you can't help but feel a little bit, it's so clever, who am I? And I didn't like feeling, what's the word? I didn't like the lack of confidence. So I decided I want to do it, and I applied to do my master's within the second year, and I remember going for the interview and them saying, you haven't yet, the minimum is 3 years, you have to work 3 years in the bank before they sponsor you for your postgraduate. They said, you're not 3 years yet, you're just into your second, you're about second year or something. And I said, oh, but by the time I go in September, I will be 3 years. You know what I mean? So they were like, okay, but they let me go. And just shy of 3 years, they gave me the scholarship, and I got into deeper topics, and that's when I learned a different portion of economics, international relations, globalization. Because before I left, my portfolio was about the World Trade Organization, and at that time we were negotiating the General Agreement of Trade and Services, the first time, because we had General Agreement of Trade in goods from the 1940s, but not in services. So financial services was a component of the range of services we have. And doing that, I saw the tensions between developing countries, and also that time we had huge capital flows into Asia, the tiger economies, and we were pulling foreign capital into all our economies, but Malaysia especially, so our stock markets boomed. But we also worried about what happens when capital turns around and goes back, and the impact on exchange rates and our ability to have sovereignty over interest rates on what mattered in our circumstance, the price of money in our country compared to, suddenly we are dictated by the price of money in exchange to other currencies, so we lose that. So I those things sort of played in my mind, and I had great bosses and mentors then who were designing a new architecture of treaty of how we should behave, what are we obliged to give in terms of opening up, but we also want to grow and become solid in our own way, and we have all these international obligations, but how do we be an international citizen yet maintain our domestic considerations for national good? So all that was really interesting in my mind, and when I went to do my master's, I wanted to actually get into that topic. And I remember telling my at that time the faculty I wanted to do something to do WTO, tensions, developing countries, and the head then said, the faculty head said, there's no one here to supervise you on that, and it's very complex. And I was like, what? No, I did it for 9 months before I came here, right? And they looked around, and there was a visiting professor from Oxford, George Mavrotas, who liked my abstract, and he said, okay, I'll do it, and he supervised me. And I got to sort of blend the dilemmas we had at work, as policymakers, and get deeper into the literature in it. So the topic of globalization, regionalization, maintaining your sovereignty whilst being a good and fair international citizen in trade and services, for example. Your right to make currency, but also to maintain your domestic stability, all that has trade-offs.
Mm-hmm.
And I found that incredibly interesting, and I still do.
And that was in which university?
In Manchester. I did my master's in Manchester.
Given that you were in Manchester, in which years?
Oh my God, you're making me sound old now. But
Because
1997, 96, around there, yes.
because a lot of people may be asking, wait a second, are you fan of the Red Devils or fan of Manchester City?
Okay. Because I actually, I'm not a big fan of football. I like watching the game only if there's a compelling reason to socialize. But there, I did like Manchester United. I remember going to see a friendly match.
There
It
was
so hard
there
to
was
get.
there was a young blonde guy called David Beckham.
Oh
back then,
yeah,
right?
yeah. I don't know whether it was my time. It was someone else. He was a French guy with a
Eric
temper.
Cantona.
Yes, that's right. So you know me.
Okay. So, how was that environment when Eric Cantona was playing?
I don't know. I hardly went to watch football. I spent a lot of time exploring. What I do is, what was it like then? Okay, Manchester was a thriving place, a party place, club scene. I'd done all my clubbing in my undergraduate years, so by the time I got there, that's all right. So I did a lot of. I go hiking. I love walking in nature. Whether in jungles here or the lovely countryside in England or anywhere. I made friends with the international students around me. I made some incredibly close friends from Spain, from Korea, from some Malaysian friends as well. And I would just get on a bus in Manchester and just pay whatever it is, and then at the end of that trip, I just get off. I just explore through bus rides or train rides. I joined a hiking club. I went on one and never went back again because I wasn't properly attired and ended up scaling a mountain without all the right gear and cried my eyes out. But it sort of I learned to pay attention when someone said village walk to the left, mountain walkers to the right, and stop talking, and pay attention to that. So I did a lot of things. Manchester, like I said, was great. We had the IRA bomb, Arndale Center. That was unfortunate. But I think Manchester then regenerated itself. It was just it's just different vibes and a lot of new age stuff, which I sort of liked reading and catching up with people on that frequency. So yeah.
That's good to know because it captures a moment, but also how society was back then compared to what we see usually across the time. Now, given that you were there for 3 years and tied in this with what happened with Bank Negara and Malaysia back in the 80s, I guess during those times they were still remembering something that was studied in many other places, like the good read down rate. When the first governor of Malaysia, the Tun Ismail Ali, decided to buy, let's buy most of the shares from the Guthrie Corporation.
Guthrie, yes.
And I believe, by that time, it was already fading, but...
Yes, it had faded. Tun Ismail, by the time I joined, Tun Ismail had stepped down, but his aura echoed. The level of the values that he espoused, integrity, frugality, prudence, discipline for the good of the nation, that was very strong, even though he had stepped down a good decade or so before me. And you see how people carry that DNA. And I think when I joined, the mantra there was more about we had to have a good helicopter view of things. We could learn from everywhere in the world and then taper it to our circumstance and needs. The word, we have to be pragmatic, it was something you heard in meetings, and not follow the herd. And I think that was played out in the 1997-98 Asian financial crisis, when Malaysia took a completely different decision path, and we had incredible opposition and belligerent preaching down on us to say that you shouldn't do it this way. I saw all that. I sat in rooms and meetings and international meetings and felt the brunt of being looked down as a country and being having great skepticism on what we did. But I was also there when we came out of it with our head high and we were vindicated by our own decision. We were, like I said, we were deemed as wrong, but we did what was right for our own country. So Tun Ismail's legacy carried on, and I think we improved on it and made it stronger through time. And it's something that's perennial as far as I'm concerned.
Mm-hmm. It's fascinating when you mentioned that particular time of the crisis, because it was not about proving them wrong, it was about proving yourself right.
We didn't set out to prove right or wrong. We wanted to do what was right for our country, our circumstance. We needed to think about the lives and livelihoods at that time. And what we did was to ensure that we had a breathing space to get stable. That was what we wanted, stability.
Mm-hmm.
When there was so much coming from external sources and internally, we needed to stabilize things. And put our house in order. We did a lot of restructuring and reforms of the financial sector as a result. And we gradually moved from a fixed to exchange rate regime that was a lot more flexible, but in our time and in the time we needed. So we didn't set out with a theory or to prove. It was about helping our own first, and I think that is important. And we were probably experimenting, and it was courage to do what was right for us at that time. And it was a very, very difficult time. And I always turn back at that period as a nation and even in my own personal life to say that, if we could get through that, we can muster a lot more and transcend.
Talking about transcendence, of course there was a different Malaysia that came after the crisis.
Mm-hmm.
And also it was a different Kristina that came after Manchester.
Yes.
People that go, they return different because it's not the same person and also it's not the same environment. So given that you develop certain skills, how those skills helped you through the crisis and then beyond?
Okay, so when I came back really into the eye of the crisis, I remember getting emails. That's how we started to have emails from colleagues in Bank Negara said, "We can't wait to have you come back because there's so much that you have to help. There's a lot. There's a portfolio. Mm-hmm. This is your portfolio." Before I even arrived, I had a portfolio of exchange rates and international reserves, and I was like, whoa! When I came in, it was like probably one of the hardest portfolios to have because exchange rates, we were being budgeted, we were hemorrhaging. Capital was flowing out. Exchange rate was depreciating. And we had George Soros say, "I'll see you at 5." It was seriously hard. So I didn't apply what I learned. I came back and it was just crisis time. You do what you have to do. You learn as you go along. And we also, remember January 1998, going home at 5 o'clock in the morning, and then coming to work at 8 o'clock, and then you go to the Bloomberg screen and you see what the exchange rate is, and then you look at, and you have to write briefs and papers and scrunch, and then I go up to the dealer's floor where foreign exchange team was working, and get updated information. And then we're thinking about policies to stem this. And then in September 98, we imposed capital controls. Our governor of the day and the deputy governor left or they were asked to leave because they did not, there was a difference in policy prescription, and then it was we were left with seeing us through, and then there were lots of other efforts that had to go through to make sure even our borders, we had to send colleagues to immigration, at airports and places like that, because you're talking about taking money in and out. Suddenly, currency, how much you can take in and out became an issue. You had to declare. So all that, the skill, I would say, is not about. I would say it's about persisting and just sticking to it, stickability. When you see so many things go wrong around your country and also the political environment, it was just chaotic. But our action gave immediate stability, and we just had to see things through. So it was an incredible learning point, and you just have to, get up and just keep doing what you have to do.
I remember a quote by Denzel Washington that maybe people have been hating already. You gotta do what you have to do so you can do what you wanna do.
Absolutely.
And it's reflected here, because the only way to pass through a crisis is working and surviving. Because it was not so many years until there was another crisis, the global financial crisis or meltdown, but that was mostly concentrated in Manhattan.
Yes.
How your division was getting shielded from that going on?
Yeah. We had the Asian financial crisis, and I think we disagree with the term global financial crisis, because in Asia we had the reverberations, but we didn't have the same depth and degree of crisis like in the West. So maybe it's great financial crisis rather than global. By 2008, when that sort of happened in the US and UK and the developed markets, we had already 10 years before, gone through our own transformation. Like I said, reform, restructure. We strengthened our systems base. We made our banks stronger. We consolidated. We did a lot of hard work. We did a lot of housekeeping. We renovated. So by the time 2008 hit, we were on a more solid footing in terms of our system's resilience. And the trade in Asia, intra-regional trade, was also a lot higher. So while we had some dips it colored us in many ways, but the vibrancy continued in this part of the world. And that's the importance of diversity. That's the importance of reform, restructure, renew and refresh yourself. If you stay inert, hoping the changes will go past you, you will become irrelevant. Transcending is about going through things. It's not about avoiding it. And you have to confront what you have to do. You have to bite the bullet. And I think as an organization, we did that because there were so many different perspectives and thoughts and input. The sum of all of us made us more courageous, more pragmatic. We looked at things from different points of view. We were always told, please make sure that you consult well so that you leave no stone unturned. Look at the first degree, second degree, third degree impact, not just what you're going to do. You have to really have that. It's like a tree. You have to have many branches in your mind of what could happen. And you can't think of everything, but do the best you can, and then you can make an informed decision.
That's right. The fractal effect of the first and the second derivative or the third derivative that creates an impact, especially for the people that walk every day.
Yes.
Or the people who have to sustain a hawker center and then all of a sudden the ringgits are not buying as they used
Absolutely.
to. So I'm happy to see that what happened in the Asian crisis helped everybody to be prepared for the great crisis that happened years after. It's also fascinating to see that how at the beginning of your early years you were searching through documents of paper, and now we were exchanging emails. So which was the biggest innovation that happened after? Because you have been experiencing those changes in technology.
Hmm. Because you are immersed in the changes and adapting to it on a daily basis through new work process or new gadget that appears at your table. In 1998, there was only one computer in the whole department of say 30, and you had to take turns to go to check your email.
Mm-hmm.
A few years later, we all had our own laptops. When I joined the bank, you had a pool of typists. So you write things down and you put it in a tray, and then you wait for the typist to take it and type it out, and then you go through it. And then they were great at not making typos, for example. They were great at that. But if there was a mistake or there was a rehash, you'd have to go through that whole process. So by 2000, you didn't have pools of typists. You had a laptop, you were the typist. You did your own work, you printed things out yourself, you could amend things yourself. And the initial phase was just, like, ooh, what's this? How do I acquaint myself with it? And it's faster. You just sort of absorb it. And I think it's that absorption, it's that immersion, it's that, I don't know what the word is, you're just entranced by that action. You don't see it as this huge technological change. Of course, when you look back, you realize, a whole pool of segment of people were no longer in your ecosystem. Things changed. Same thing like today. Things get scrunched faster. The data gets analyzed much quicker, and you can bring in so many different data points, right? To sort of come up with perspectives. And I think, working in any organization, you have to have that perspective. It was just adapt as you go along.
It's also impressive to see that you didn't stop saying, oh, what am I going to do with this thing they call computer? But you embraced that, and then it confirmed the quote that the constant thing that happens in life is change.
Yes. Change, and your ability to adapt to it. So Excel sheets, when I joined, 92, in Bank Negara, you didn't have a computer with Excel. You would do manual, and then you pass it to someone who had a huge calculator. And then people would go through it. You had 3 people to input data, extract data, and they'd have a ruler to make sure that, whatever they put in, you talk about millions and hundreds of millions, right? But they were great at spotting things. Attention to detail was bar none, So by the time we had Excel sheets and, before mid-90s and onwards, it was like, wow, this is really good. And you can put in a formula, you know what I mean? And you just press and ta-da, So for me, that was like, you play around with things. You had, instead of one person that had the master data and that master, Excel sheet, everyone had access to it. So it's accessibility as well that technology has allowed. There's just so much out there.
We were revisiting your journey, and then all of a sudden we are hitting the late 2000s, the early 2010s.
Mm-hmm.
And there was, I remember the movement of Occupy Wall Street back in the West.
Yeah.
But here, what was going on?
2010, what was going on? I can't remember, but I know in 2010 I was traveling a lot for free trade agreements. What was happening then in Asia was the renewed sense of new markets, moving up the value chain from huge dependence on agriculture, commodities, and manufacturing to higher value added services and industries. in my line of work, it was a time, reflective of the need for new markets, including in services, of which financial services was a market, for licenses, for banks to operate, financial institutions to operate. That was the time that I was traveling a lot to do Asian, ASEAN, bilateral, trilateral, regional, WTO, World Trade agreements. That was, for me, an exciting time as well.
I believe that there was always places, but also people that you met in those travels.
Mm.
So when you were doing those things, which were your usual allies? We don't have to say the name, but we can put like a fictitious personas as, for example, oh yeah, Snoopy the barista who always got the coffee. He also got the biggest tip of the day. So how did you find out those people and how those people keep connected?
Okay, so I grew up, because I moved around actually a lot. Every 3 to 4 years, my father's job would take him to a new place. I learned to make friends. I was actually quite shy, but I learned to make a few friends and just get out of my shyness, and just go and say hi to people. And I always found that there are interesting people in all walks. So my father's job meant that we had access to royalty in the States. For example, my dad and mum would go for the coronation of the Sultan of Terengganu, and the circle would include, playing with, Sultan's children, for example, right down to the person who drove the tractor, or the person who, we used to have someone on a tricycle come and collect our rubbish. It was that at that point. And I remember my mom would always have conversations. So all walks of life, I've always had sort of exposure to, and if you take time to talk to people and listen to their stories, like what you're doing now, it transcends barriers of social strata, economic, financial, ethnic. You just have to be curious, and I have been blessed. I've got friends from all races. I like talking to people. Actually, I like listening to people more, their stories. So when you ask, in my mind, there's just so many faces and so many different types of interactions.
Now, given those interactions, of course there were moments in the professional life that somebody, some organization would say, why don't you consider getting out of Bank Negara, the poachers?
Yes.
So how do you deal with the poachers when you were so loyal to Bank Negara?
I have never been driven by the paycheck.
Mm-hmm.
I'm third generation civil servant, and I use the word servant in the most humble way, where you serve the country. My grandfather was a civil engineer for the state in Kedah. He built roads and infrastructure. My father as well. He joined the civil service, but in the civil building engineering side. So he built roads and infrastructure. I'm third generation, and I think he was so proud, my father and my mother as well, when I got a job at Bank Negara, because it's service to the nation. My ambitions haven't ever been about living a wealthy life, because in my realm, my father was always about be happy with what you have, and service, and he was a happy person in terms of what we have is enough for us. Of course, when you're growing up and you want loads of things, and conspicuous consumption got more and more in the 80s, but I think saying no to the paycheck is also because I like work that connects me with what the country needs. Um, it's easy to get a bigger paycheck. You just keep working and you keep achieving, but you need to have a sense of fulfillment. That's always been and it's not like I haven't been tempted to leave, but it always came back to, yeah, but I don't really want a fancy car. I don't need a lot of those trappings. I think if you are clear in that, it's very easy to say no to a headhunter. It's very flattering though, but it's for you to know your worth as a professional. But then go and learn something new in your organization. For me, it's boredom or not learning something new that sort of pushes me to do something else.
Given that perspective, in the early 2010s, I remember there was a new building.
Mm-hmm.
They call it nowadays the Sasana,
Yes.
which is like less than 1 kilometer away from the original Bank Negara.
Yes.
So, how people in the Bank Negara building saw the new building?
Sasana is an extension of the great vision that Governor Zeti had, in terms of creating a space for people to learn, to collaborate, a knowledge space. And I think the pursuit of knowledge for me is very sweet. I'm motivated by that. And sharing it with others and elevating people and creating better capacities. And it's not about you. It's always about how others around you get better and what you leave behind for someone after you. So Sasana Kijang is our Bank Negara's Learning Center. And we also brought international and regional institutions that reflect the knowledge sharing space, collaboratively working together beyond geography for betterment of our domain, which is financial services. So how do we see? We love the building. I'm very fond of it. I think it's beautiful. The light, the transparency through the glass. It's all very symbolic. So we're very. I have great pride in it, and of course ASB is a further extension of that vision. And this whole precinct is about education, changing and transforming, and it's constant change. And how do we keep adapting without being overwhelmed? Because you have to have faith in something greater than you, and that should overcome that faith in doing better and learning more should overcome your fear.
Overcoming fears is something that people always have doubts at the beginning until they do the jump and go ahead. And I believe that between the Sasana and the original Bank Negara, there was a huge green space that in the middle 2010s, they began to build what we know right now, the Asia School of Business. So how was the talking inside Bank Negara that, now they're doing a business school, they will not stop with the Sasana, but they will do more? What will the contrarios were saying, or how was the party of moving these things ahead? I would like to hear from you.
Yeah.
When that thing began to circulate around, how was received?
Sure. Sasana is actually Bank Negara's learning center. But ASB is, I would like to think, the gift through the central bank for all to learn. It goes beyond central banking and central bankers. It's about business and how that dimension cuts across everyone. It's about collaborating with an incredibly great institution like MIT Sloan to propel us together. And again, share and spread knowledge. Financial services is a very knowledge-intensive industry, very knowledge-intensive business, which with innovation, technology, and innovation, the speed of it, the impact of it, reverberates. It just like what happened in 2008. It just reverberates across geographies. Um, it is an acknowledgement that we should be hungry for knowledge. We should bring together different minds to learn from each other, different industries, different countries, different ideas, so that we enrich ourselves in that knowledge base. We move up. And I think it's also a reflection. It's the space is calm. It's very classic in its design. It's very open in what light it lets in, and what it exudes. That pursuit of knowledge is an anchor. You need to refuel in order to keep having the energy to try out new things and take you to new shores. So I like to think that we have great pride in the symbol of the pursuit of knowledge, which is very important.
Mm-hmm. The pursuit of knowledge is always well received, because this reminds me about the pursuit of happiness. It's like
Yes.
it's not the guarantee that you will get the happiness, but the pursuit of happiness is something that you should go for.
Yes.
Here it's always encouraged that you pursue the knowledge and you also get the knowledge and apply the knowledge.
Mm-hmm.
The mindset manuals.
Yes.
Now, given that this started the institution of Asia School of Business as a business school, that it got the idea to amalgamate not only what the institution has, but what can produce as well. Some people may have a curiosity of how the influence on Bank Negara will go moving forward, especially because it was like a kind of a product of two systems.
Yes.
So I would like to ask you, given that right now we have like a third administration in the Asia School of Business, because there was,
yes.
How do you see the institution moving forward?
I'm very excited about the horizon ahead. I think every change brought with it a new injection of intellectual thinking is one, but also personality, as well as the drive and the inspiration that comes from change, actually. I think what we have today is an intellectual asset that we wish to share with more. We wish to draw like a magnet others who are curious, who leave their own comfort zones and countries to come and discover Asia in a very safe, embracive country and region. It's changing all the time, it's different, it's a blend. And I think the changes reflect the pragmatism of blending new things, injecting new ideas, and the vigor of trying to make a difference in a space that we're learning as well as we go along. We did some brave things like re-engineer our 2-year program to one, which is, I think, very important that we did that. And now we're at that stage of pushing it into a new market for us, and then new things that, for example, Sanjay is bringing through. We did the re-engineering under Jake, and now it's Sanjay with the ideas that come through for how we're going to harness digital learning for accessibility, for inclusivity. Education should be something that gives people the opportunity rather than creates barriers. And I think technology is a great, how shall we say, leveler, without reducing the the richness of the content, the value, and I absolutely understand and appreciate the whole point about making it more interactive. When you come, learn what you need by yourself, for example, online, but when you bring people together, it's that energy, it's that triggering, it's the inspiration you get from another person. That is what we need to bring back to learning. So yeah, I think I'm very excited, actually very, very excited. I'm so happy to be part of this journey as well.
I believe that it was not a way of poaching, but after you were around 30 years in Bank Negara, how did they come across and say, yeah, you see that beautiful woman, Kristina, we need her? How it was?
Oh, thank you. I came here on a request to come because at that time the COO role was vacant, right? So we wanted to ensure that we also knew there was going to be a transition in the leadership, that we wanted to make sure that the role of COO was filled in order to, number one, conduct the search as well, and also to help with the transition. So it was more an ask upon me, which I took on. I had, I remember it was a Thursday morning when I got the call to say my senior management asked I consider, and I said, oh, okay. And then I said, I was saying, tell me on Monday, you have the weekend to sleep over it. I said, okay. And by Monday, I thought about it, and I said, okay, I'll do it, because I believe in education. I believe in ASB as an endeavor. I had handled the ASB portfolio for 5 years. I felt I wanted to help see through this transition for stability. So it was an ask, which I'm glad I took it on. It was scary as well, because I was like, wow, what? I'm not sure. Okay. And then I went through the process, and then I said, okay, I'll do my very best. And it was a huge learning curve for me. It was something that really pulled out a lot of all the different parts of me, you know. It also sort of has pushed me a lot. And I think I've grown, because I don't believe growth is through easy. You grow best, you know, when you're pushed out into something that you have to confront and manage things.
So now I'm talking with Kristina, the operating officer. I want to know if that Kristina, the central banker, how was that internal dialogue? Because given this request, that means that your tenure at Bank Negara has to come to an end, or?
No, I'm still with Bank Negara. I'm on secondment.
Oh, okay.
But I had to think about it, because I would have like another 7 years in Bank Negara. I'm in my 50s. Statutory retirement age is 60. So I had to sit down and also think about how this move would intersect with how I thought I would finish in the central bank. And I also had to think about, okay, what am I going to do after that? You know, all that did play in my mind. But at the end of the day, I put that aside. It's not about me. It's about what needs the need of the moment. And I wanted to be part of that help and that journey. And I'm glad I did it. My life has always been one that it's always been, how shall I say, I'm chosen rather than I choose. And then, but when it is a decision I make, I stick to it and I try my best to make it work. Because, you know, for me, it's I love my nation, I love my country, I love my central bank, I love Bank Negara. I didn't realize that till I was sitting across the road, how much I am thankful. I've been in Bank Negara now 30 years, 31 years actually, And my mother, I had the gift of my mother's life in my life for only 29 years. So I've been in Bank Negara and embraced in it and grew up in it longer than I had my mother in my life.
Mm.
So that realization as well, when I was like, so when I say I love, I really mean it, and I would do what it takes.
This is very revealing, and thank you for sharing this with us. We mentioned at the beginning that there was an influence of a guy, they call him Tun Ismail Ali. And now, with your permission, I need to ask you about this woman they call Zeti. So, how first from a man to a woman change the perspective, not only for the women of your generation, but for the ones that come after you?
Yeah.
And number two, given that this place was also a gift that she envisioned, which are your perceptions when you hear her name?
Sure. So Governor Zeti was governor for 16 years and Tun Ismail was governor for 18 years, and they both have had, given their run in the central bank, a huge influence and impact on us as an organization, and their vision is incredible. Governor Zeti is a great visionary. She visualizes where you need to, what needs, where we have to be, and the steps that need to be taken then can, sort of be structured. But you have to know what, in your mind's eye, where you want to get at. Then you can channel everyone towards that. And what was it before Governor Zeti? Yes, she's definitely the first woman to helm Bank Negara. And what she brought was a roundness, a completeness towards more attention to our development, towards improving our leadership competencies. When I joined, we never had things like training for leadership. I mean, you don't train for leadership, but development opportunities that was a lot more clearly defined about beyond doing your studies, but also the stretch assignments, looking at assessing people for their potential, and then having conversations about if there are areas that they need to improve on or work on, being more self-aware. All this was not a framework we were brought into. We were ordained into it under her governorship because she brought in the right professionals to create that framework, and then we had to implement it. It wasn't success overnight. It was like a journey, right? But we knew we were starting to embrace best practices around the world about how you lead. Governance also became something that we became. It was a lot more surfaced and structured, how we structured ourselves, the focus, and a lot more, how we collaborate became something that I think we needed to appreciate. We were not, how shall we say, in central bank, you're not there because you're a woman. You don't get up because you're a man or a woman kind of thing. It just, the appreciation for your merit was always there. And she has a great legacy. And I think the ASB today is a symbol of, pragmatic attention to education, but also the relationship with MIT Sloan. I mean, it just propelled us. It was a smart strategic move. I remember going for a Hari Raya open house with one of my ex-lecturers in University Malaya, and she had a daughter, I think must have been 9 years old, and my ex-lecturer said, "Oh, this is Kristina, she was my student, she did, politics and stuff like that." And then she works in Bank Negara, and the little girl, her eyes, I saw her eyes like, I would like to be like Zeti and be a governor of a central bank. I said, oh, that's great, and I believe you can. And she said, yes, because I want my signature on the ringgit. So for a 9-year-old to see Governor Zeti's signature and be told that that is a woman as well, but beyond that, it is a great professional and a central banker, and for the little girl to say, at that age, that's great. It transcends time, and I believe she will be, in whatever route she takes, she'll be great. My lecturer's daughter.
Given that we have been talking about journeys and also regions around the world, I would like to ask from your permission to discuss what about the neighbors, because if we have Central Bank Negara here, we may have also the MAS in Singapore,
Yes.
and the other central banks in the Asian community. So how do you talk with each other? How has been the relationship?
Yeah. So we actually have a very good history, actually in her story, sorry, it's a joke, of a relationship and collaboration starting as far back as the mid-1960s, early 1960s, from the time of Tun Ismail, like his interaction with the Bank of Thailand or the Monetary Authority of Singapore, for example. The presence of mind that we're a small country in the global landscape, of course, but we have neighbors who are also growing up and learning about the art of monetary policy, the challenges of financial stability. We should be talking to each other because we are closer to each other's stage of development than in the developed countries, for example. So we have had a tradition since the 1960s of the central banks of first bilaterally, then trilaterally, then they said, hey, let's bring in more to sort of exchange views in a time when the way we do it now is so pervasive. We can talk virtually and all that. In the 60s, you had telephone calls were very expensive then. And air travel wasn't frequent, but they made it a point to meet up on a bilateral basis and then set up like groupings like the Southeast Asian Central Bankers Research and Training Center, the CSIN Center, which is near us, to bring together to learn from each other, but also it became a grouping that could speak as one voice on issues that would affect us in a swathe if a decision was made by international monetary organizations, for example. All of us are affected in a brushstroke. So why don't we sit together and raise our voice, right? There may be differences, but we all are more similar to each other, and the effect being so, in this region, and the levels of societal development, growth, economic structure, we would feel the pain almost the same way within this region compared to, let's say, in a more developed countries. So it's in our interest to have one voice, collectively, give a different contrarian view, but at least be heard. And that is the other thing about coming together collectively. You need to be heard. And smart people from the region, coming together and having a more united approach. And one of the great things I love about the stories, going through the archives, was how the CSIN Center, through the governors, came up with a carve-out in the General Agreement of Trade and Services gaps. Because as they were negotiating about opening up and liberalizing trade and services, the financial sector said, hey, wait a minute, we're a bit special, It was late 80s, early 90s, that we're a bit special because if something goes wrong in the financial sector, it seeps into and impacts the economy. So yes, we are a sector to be traded, like opening up and giving business opportunities to foreign banks and financial institutions, but there has to be an emergency safeguard that will say, I can't give you a license, I have to breach my obligation, my commitment because of stability. or integrity issues, like why should I allow you to come in if there is in another territory there was some shenanigans related. So we CSEN started it. Bank Negara, CSEN started it to say, let's have a clause, a carve out to say, if there are certain conditions of instability, then we have the right to rescind that or to take a slower move. And that started from here, a group of developing countries. And I remember reading in the files. We wrote to the Federal Reserve, we wrote to, Bank of England, and the responses were like, almost like laissez-faire rules the day, we don't need this. But that interaction and that compromise in the end, from what we wanted to what was finally shaped, the prudential carve-out in GATS is one of the most powerful. And it is used by all, it can be used by all countries in the interest of financial stability. So the relationship around us is useful if we work together.
Given that particular story, I need to ask you, through your career, which was the biggest compromise you faced and why it was challenging?
I have never had to really make compromises about a job or assignment. If I ever had to make a compromise, it was about maybe what was happening in my personal life. The biggest compromise I ever had to make from work was not having a second child.
Okay.
And that's the only compromise I ever made for health reasons and such. And the second diluted compromise is the time I could spend with my son. I have an only child. But I've always been very lucky when I needed to spend time, either take a break or take a different portfolio in the interest of my family. I was always given that. So for me, a compromise is at work. I've never had to compromise. I've never had to compromise my values, my principles. I've never had to, never. So I feel blessed in that. But like I said, it's probably just the loss of my second child that was the highest compromise I had to make in my own life.
And I'm very privileged to hear that from you, because given that sometimes in careers you may not find it, to be aware that you had those compromises and you were able to deal with was even more insightful than to never been aware of. Because I also been interviewing other people that they say they never had a compromise, but they may never been aware. So to hear that you have that even in your personal life is really welcome, and we thank you for that. Given that you have been in many places, which are the little differences that you've seen across the regions? Because you've been in other places around the world. What made people different and what made people similar?
The more you travel, the more you realize that everyone is the same in terms of what they will wish in their lives and what they treasure. People treasure family, people treasure and cherish opportunities, people treasure and value being trusted, returning that trust, moving out their comfort zones. The differences, I think, is about maybe cultural, the top bits, the cosmetics. When you move around, let's say Asia is dynamic, it's magnificent. Every country in 2 hours or 1 hour is so different to the next, and I think that's incredible. All just vying towards, elevating and improving. And I think the spirit of in all of Asia is, I think we are all a nation. All nations put together are all very enterprising, very hardworking, very can't say no. I'm sure for generations before, to get on a boat, not knowing, where you're going to land, except to hear that, coming to a country or a region will give you opportunities for betterment or to trade. I think we all have our insecurities, the same insecurities. We all want to be appreciated. We all want to feel embraced for ourselves. We all value kindness. We all bloom when there's kindness and compassion and there's care, the celebration of life everywhere, So I think a lot of variations, a lot of differences in how we dress and how we eat, but when you look down, we're all very similar. And I think I'm a child of two worlds. When I look at it, similar. The culture from my dad's side and culture from my mom's side, all very similar in what they want.
Given that you have been mentioning that people in the end are very similar, I need to ask about your close associates that are also in the room. If you want to disclose, it's okay. Can we know the story about the little roasters that we have here?
Of course.
So how they came out to be your close associates?
Yes, so this is a set. Yeah. So I got this in Hong Kong in 2017 when I went for an executive education program Bank Negara sent 3 of us. I was one of them. And this was in the gift shop of the hotel. I'm born in the year of the rooster. So I love anything to do with roosters. And my son is also a rooster. We're 36 years, it's a 12-year interval. So I looked at it, they were sitting next to each other, and I thought, oh, that's like me and my son. I'll buy it. Yeah. So it's followed me around my office since 2017. And I have some good memories of that executive education course in Hong Kong. And so, yes, thank you for noticing the little associates I have around me.
Oh, yes, because let's be honest, a room full of associates is not the same as a room of your 2 closest associates.
Yes, absolutely. But thank you for noticing.
Yeah, because where we organizing and designing this little set, we were looking for some books that are right now allocated in the camera, and then all of a sudden, wait a second, there are 2 little rosters here. So that's what has been going on. Now, given that we have been going through your journey and the people that have been influencing you the most, some people may be watching this. Among them will be some young girls that may see something in you, and they may have so many questions. So one question that they usually come out is, what piece of advice will you give to your younger self?
Listen to your intuition and your instincts. I found that in my life when I ignored it or I don't know why I'd have funny feeling about something or someone. I usually regret if I don't listen to that. I like to think I'm scientific. I love chemistry and biology and things like that, but I think there's something else, rooted in how we've evolved, and try and listen more to that. I don't fight what you can't control, really. Look for where you can come in and make some sense out of it. I've gone with the flow of things in life, and that's been, if you ask me, my mantra for 30 years. Go with the flow, but not get tossed around. That's not what I mean by go with the flow. Just, if you can't fight it and you have to sort of make the best out of it, make the best out of it. Keep improving yourself. Don't undervalue yourself. Don't compare yourself. I did for quite a bit in my early years. And then there was a point where I stopped. And that's when things sort of fell into place. Take me as I am. I am what I am. I'm not going to pretend to be anything or anyone else. I'm not relative to anything and anyone else. And I found that, things sort of, you draw what is closer to you if you are truer to yourself.
Mm-hmm.
So, starting from instincts, trying to make sense, anchoring yourself. So my younger self would be someone who is, don't be so shy. I was very, very shy. And also, my younger self didn't speak up much at all. It was like a muscle I had to build. Sometimes it's like my heart would beat here before I say something because I'm so scared I'm going to say something that, reveal I don't know anything. But in the end, I just said, you know what? I actually don't know. Might as well ask.
Mm-hmm.
Why pretend? And like I said, it triggered. Ask for help when you need help. And you're not a rock. You don't pretend to be one. There are many around you who will just come into your life and help. But it has to start with you saying, I don't know. And things will happen positively if you have that courage to say, I don't know, but I'm willing to learn.
Mm-hmm. That's such a very powerful message. And I really thank you for giving the opportunity to discuss this. I cannot find a better way to close the episode. So how can people find you?
Well, I'm here in KL in the Asia School of Business, but I'm also on LinkedIn.
Uh-huh.
I've started to be a little bit more active, not a little bit more. I think from beginning this year, I wanted to create more awareness about ASB, and I'm on LinkedIn, so look me up there.
Mm-hmm.
I'm always happy to make new connections, and if ever you're in Kuala Lumpur, come to Asia School of Business. We have a great campus.
That's fantastic. So thank you once again. I really love doing this. So for people out there, please take care and see you when I see you. Bye.
See you. Bye.
And that's it.